Ever since I was a little kid, my mom has had serious medical issues. I've got lots of memories growing up and going to the hospital to visit her after she had had one of her many, many surgeries. She'd had a rare condition that was causing her upper and lower jaw bones to interact negatively with one another, and slowly they were deteriorating. They had to take a toe from each of her feet and then put it in her mouth through her ears to connect the upper and lower jaw as a very revolutionary, never been done before surgery. This led to many, many, many more surgeries, which also led to a very inconsistent upbringing for me and my siblings. Not only was my mom battling unthinkable personal medical issues, but as one of the consequences of all of these surgeries, she eventually became addicted to pain medications and developed an opiate addiction. Now, I'm really, really happy to say that today she is pretty damn healthy, and she's certainly very, very, very sober and in recovery, and nothing like the mom I grew up with. I don't judge that mom that I did grow up with. I can't imagine being in her shoes, raising a family, having a personal medical crisis that led to more and more and more intrusive and very, very dangerous surgeries while also going through addiction. I certainly don't blame her, and I have so much empathy for what that must have been like. But in my new understanding of how to take care of myself as an adult, I have to acknowledge that the little kid that was raised by that drug-addicted mom who was working through her own personal trauma and crisis definitely was negatively impacted. And so I did a lot of interesting things to attach myself to an unstable caregiver, which was my mom, when she was particularly sick towards the end of her addiction, and certainly when she was constantly rehabbing all of her terrible, terrible surgeries. I would hope that this went without saying, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it anyway. My mom did a very good job in a great many ways as I was growing up. I have pleasant memories to go along with some harder ones. She did a lot of wonderful things as a parent. She was not a mess all the time, but it certainly did get dicey towards the end, and there were definitely issues that I packed away from my childhood that have come to the surface in my adulthood that I needed to address. I didn't need her to address, I just needed to personally address so that I could learn from them and do things a little bit different. She tells me this story of me going to see her in the hospital. Her face was about this big, and I popped in the doorway to look at her, and she just looked so scary, and I just ran. I just felt tears kind of come up a little bit right there just thinking about it, because I still remember to this day looking in and not recognizing her and being afraid of her. Recently, my mom has been having a lot of back issues and nerve problems and losing sensitivity down her leg, and it brings up a lot for her. And as an adult, it's been interesting to try to see how I can be supportive without putting myself in some sort of unnecessary and potentially triggering situation. As many of you know, and certainly the rest of you will now, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I've come a long, long way as to being very mindful of situations that are activating for me, that are triggering for me, that may potentially lead to unhealthy and regressive behaviors. And being around my mom while she's medically fragile, depending on how vulnerable she is something that I was concerned about. And the reason I bring this up is because in this video, I had the opportunity recently to support her in a way that I was able to set some boundaries, but still honor the fact that I wanted to be a consistent and good and available friend and son to my mom. So she was going in for this procedure that was going to require her to be partially sedated, and then they were going to be, a doctor was going to be putting in needles into her low back and I believe through her sacrum to try to calm and numb nerves in order to try some PRP therapy. I coach CrossFit and she takes my classes, and I knew she wasn't doing well, and I knew she was going to be having this procedure, but she asked me something that I didn't necessarily expect. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to take her to her procedure, but then at the last minute, she told me that she wanted me to go in and hold her hand. This was like the night before we went in. The idea of seeing my mom in pain, holding her hand, it brought up a lot of things for me, and I wasn't sure it was going to be a healthy experience for me. I didn't know if it was something that I wanted to do, so I put up a boundary, which was a big, big deal for me, and I told her that I would drive her, but I helped find someone else to go in and hold her hand. Now, historically, I would have thought that I was a terrible son for this. How could I? How selfish, how self-centered to not be there, to be the one holding her hand. I would have found some way, shape, or form to condemn myself. But given everything I've learned, I sort of rerouted that traditional line of thinking and said, no, I know what I want, I know what I'm comfortable with, and I know it doesn't make me a bad person to say that this is too much for me to go in and watch a medical procedure for my mom based on the childhood I had and based on how new I am to sobriety. And she was okay with that. But a week went by, I saw a little bit of the pictures of what was going on, and I decided I would go in there. And this time, she said it was okay for me to film. And so I was very curious to know how that would go. How would I feel? What would be my mental response to seeing my mom in pain? And what was great was that while I had a ton of empathy for her, I didn't take on her emotions. I didn't fraternize with this scared, insecure child who needs his mom. And doesn't know what else to do without her. I came in as an adult and I just supported her. And so I took her to her appointment. We filmed the procedure. She is so incredibly tough. I cannot believe how brave she is. But I was able to be there with her, support her, capture footage, but not take any of her emotions on and stay right-sized about the whole thing. Now, I've gotten some feedback from some of you in the past who are like, what is the big deal here? Well, for me, the big deal is that I have at times toxic relationship history with my mom. And so reestablishing a healthy adult parent, adult child relationship has been a really huge thing that her and I have been working on that seems to be going incredibly well. And I thought this was a big win. I just thought this was a really, really big win to be able to support her how I thought I could, but honor myself, my concerns, my personal feelings, and set boundaries without taking any position of anger towards myself or judgment. And then working my way to a higher level of comfort to be in the room with her and realizing that I can kind of take care of my own emotions. I can be mindful of my past and then step into this experience with a fresh lens and a better perspective on how to be a good friend, how to be a good son, and how to honor myself. I don't know about you, but I have come from a position with my parents where I probably needlessly put them on a pedestal. And I sometimes compromise my own thoughts and my own wants and my own feelings in order to assimilate to theirs, or to make sure that they liked me, or to make sure that they thought well of me, thought highly of me. I was very codependent on their perception of me and their words towards me. And I'm not that person today. I'm someone who looks to myself for validation. I look to myself for soothing. I honor myself. I see what I want. I take care of me. I don't need anybody else to say or do anything in particular, including my parents, for me to be okay. So all of that leads me to just being in this really cool place where I can step up and participate in other people's lives for the right reasons, with the right intention, without any fear of rejection, without any sense of pressure or obligation, but from a place of want, not a place of need. And that is a huge, huge thing to differentiate for me personally. I hope that was worth something to you. I wasn't entirely sure how I wanted to talk about this, but I did think it was something that was worth mentioning, given the work I've done around my childhood trauma, being raised by addicts and alcoholics who are now in recovery, and sort of figuring out who I am and who I want to be, how I want to act, and what situations I will and will not take part of. Big shout out to my mom for being like very much okay with and damn near encouraging me to film, wanting me to capture this experience for you guys. She goes through a lot. She does it sober. She has such a good attitude. She's going through a major personal crisis right now in her life, and I just can't believe how well she's handling everything. So Mom, if you're watching, which I know you are because she's my #1 fan, but I love you. Thank you for sharing your life with me, letting me come along and do what I could to support you through this procedure, which definitely looked not fun, but you handled it. You're an absolute warrior, and I love you. And thank you to everyone else who is watching. Just know that I very much value your time, and I will see you guys in the next video. I'm a total mama's boy, and with proper boundaries, I will always be a mama's boy.